All right, fools, welcome to another Motley Fool interview. I'm Rule Breakers senior analyst and lead advisor Tim Byers. With me, analyst Jason Hall, and the CEO of SentinelOne, Tomer Weingarten. Tomer, thanks for being here. We're really thrilled to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. That's my pleasure.
Well, let's get into it. SentinelOne is a relatively new addition to the Moneyball database, and it's a company that fools have come to know. But let's hear it in your words. What does SentinelOne do? Like, what's the broad story of SentinelOne? If you can kind of start there.
Yeah, look, SentinelOne is an AI cybersecurity platform. It's very clear that throughout the past couple of decades, we've seen cybersecurity transform in a very significant way. And obviously, one of the forces shaping cybersecurity, and this is not only today, but even a decade ago, is actually AI. And this is where SentinelOne was born. This is where we have come up with a complete new concept on how you secure what we felt is the most important footprint in cybersecurity, which is the devices that we all use as humans. This is where we started. This is where we applied AI on the edge in an embedded way to basically deliver complete autonomous protection that has really changed the way that people thought about cybersecurity on endpoint devices. A decade ago, if you remember, there was this small thing that was called the antivirus. Right now, if you check into every high-grade enterprise environment, obviously folks are not using a classic antivirus anymore. They're using this new system that's called NEDR in many cases, or XDR. And this is really the innovation that SentinelOne has brought into the market about a decade ago. From there, we've expanded our platform capabilities to apply the same level of autonomous AI to not protect only end devices, but also to protect cloud footprints and all the way to the entire enterprise perimeter by really focusing our AI capabilities on the broad base data set that exists in the enterprise, knowing that the best security really comes from the best visibility. And thus, our platform has evolved into this mega scale data lake that today is probably one of the fastest data lakes in the world today, that can really ingest pretty much in real time the telemetry, the events, and the control of any security product you have in your environment. So if you think about it, SentinelOne today is almost a meta platform that unifies data from every part of the enterprise, every type of product, whether it's an endpoint security product or a firewall or email security or identity security. It brings it together to apply AI in near real time and then autonomously orchestrate action. So that's basically what we do. We're trying to automate the entire cybersecurity stack, and we're doing it, not because it's a great technology. We're doing it because there's a distinct need to evolve cybersecurity to actually meet the type of threats that we're seeing out there today. Obviously, AI and generative AI specifically is accelerating the threat landscape. It's accelerating what attackers can do. And we're seeing time and time again that if you are not fast enough, you apply cybersecurity, you're almost bound to fail with addressing attacks that are coming your way. And the biggest losers from all of that are us, consumers. SentinelOne today protects half of the Fortune 10, countless Fortune 500, many of the critical services that all of us use in our day-to-day life, whether it's, when you're making a phone call or getting some ride share or picking up, your favorite fast food chain meal. All of that is protected, with technologies like SentinelOne and SentinelOne specifically. And obviously, when you think about all these transactions that happen, we're talking about, petabytes and exabytes of data that represents these transactions. That's what SentinelOne does. We process these transactions, these events in real time, and we find any anomaly, any badness, any malicious activity, and then we block it right in its tracks.
So, Tomer, that opens up almost a Pandora's box of questions that I want to ask. So I'm going to try to not ask 35 questions and expect you to answer all of them at the same time. But one of the things that I think is interesting with SentinelOne, you're one of the co-founders. You founded the business, I believe, 12 or 13 years ago. This is not a brand new company. I think it's come on a lot of people's radar really over the past year and change. Of course, CrowdStrike's massive outage, may have opened some opportunity for your business as this companies started saying, hey, we really need to explore all of the choices. But again, the business has been around for a while. And I'm curious, so two questions that I want to ask. The first one, your background is not specifically in cybersecurity. You have a little bit of a technology background and some other things as well. Of course, George Kurtz is a security. His background and history is in security. But at the same time, last I checked, Elon Musk did not come from Ford, and Jeff Bezos was not in the book business before he founded Amazon. So I'm curious about your background that led you to found the business a decade ago, and then what you've seen, where your vision was for the business a dozen years ago to where it is now, and which, I mean, it feels like eons have passed in the past decade.
Yeah, yeah. Let me try and unpack that. We've been around for a while. We've been one of the fastest growing companies on the public market since we became public. We were actually one of the fastest growing companies in the entire world, even before. We went public. I think Deloitte Fast 500 ranked us as probably number one in the Bay Area for a couple of good years. So all in all, we've had this ability to take very advanced machine learning models and put them on devices and create very I think differentiated outcomes from customers. And this is not to say anything about CrowdStrike and the outage, but there's one really important thing to understand about our market, and I think a lot of the peers in our market also would subscribe to that same exact notion. We collectively are targeting something that's close to $100 billion target market opportunity. Yeah. There is not going to be a single winner, and I don't care if somebody is successful in one part of the market. There is a ton of room to grow, and if you even look at endpoint market share data, SentinelOne last year was the only standalone pure play that actually grew endpoint market share. Everybody else, including the ones that you mentioned, have actually ceded market share. So the market is so big, a lot of it's still in the hands of incumbents, that our success, our progress over the years was never predicated, not by CrowdStrike, not by Palo Alto Networks, not by Microsoft, which is a very dominant player in cybersecurity. There is just a lot of room to grow. The market that we serve today is not only in the Fortune 500, it spans all the way down to the long tail of SMBs, medium-sized enterprises. There is a lot of opportunity in this market, and this goes through endpoint security, data analytics, cloud security. Again, it's $100 billion plus of market share to go after. So we're feeling really good about our ability to continue and grow. We've been demonstrating best of breed growth rates for a few good years now. There's no slowdown in what we do. And the other element for us was, how do we graduate as fast as we can from this more nimble and small startup and into a fully profitable company? And I think that for us, that was kind of a big hurdle to clear as well. And this year we're obviously guiding into complete free cash flow profitability for the entire year. It's going to be a first time for us, so that's a big inflection point for us. And obviously we're going to look to expand that into the coming years. And you're starting to look at this fast grower type company that also is becoming highly, highly profitable. So we've seen that movie, I think, with a few other cybersecurity providers. And I want to believe that we're going to be the next big one. And so far, technology has really proven that we're able to capture those opportunities. We're able to come in, even as a challenger to some of these bigger companies, and really land tremendous deals, tremendous accounts, be a very critical partner for all these enterprises out there. Let me go back to the question. How I came to SentinelOne, and
I just
how.
want to say I'm impressed that you are circling back to that. So I asked a lot, so thank you for remembering that.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just trying to do my best, and I realize it's probably kind of an interesting point, right? I mean, I didn't come from cybersecurity. I think it's also interesting to also point to the fact that there's no university for cybersecurity, right? I mean, it's not something that you learn about. It's a very free flow, type of a domain. I actually started in the other side of cybersecurity, which is being on the offensive side. Both me and my co-founder, who in years he became, with the years he became head of innovation at Checkpoint Software, and he really made cybersecurity his profession. But we both started on basically, how to get into places and how to disassemble defenses. And I think the hacker mentality at the end of the day allows you to tackle problems in a very free-form way. And when I say free-form way, maybe a different way to put it is just completely out of the box. And when you think about the challenges in cybersecurity, they are totally free-form. The attackers, the adversaries that we deal with every single day, they don't follow any book. They don't go with a specific dogma. So the problem is very free form, which was incredibly interesting to us. My proficiency, kind of came more from cloud scale and machine learning algorithms. Back then it was statistical significance more than anything else. And we kind of thought that marrying these two things together could provide an answer on how you detect badness in a very generic way. How do you just leverage the data visibility you have to potentially, put an algorithm out there that will discern bad from good? And that was kind of inception point for us. So it was an incredible, problem to deal with. We felt like the market opportunity is absolutely going to be there with the cloud just coming in and really changing how people think about parameters. We knew how networks operated, we knew machine learning, we knew cloud scale, and we had a lot of great security DNA in our core group of engineers. I'm an engineer by training as well. I was part of the first, 11 engineers that actually wrote code, into our products. So also understanding the problem domain and technically being kind of in the weeds of how these technologies work, both on how attackers work and how defense should work, I think has just been a tremendous strength for us. But lastly, I mean, we got to tap to some of the biggest and best talent worldwide. And we've had it even as we started. Obviously, Israel is a great hub for cybersecurity talent. A lot of the folks that we've recruited initially were the best that we could find globally. So we were never relegated into any one domain. And I think that just created this very, very, distinct core group of engineers that from there, we had the ability to grow and get just immense talent with, dealing with immense concepts that we all believed will change the way that people think about security, and in turn, potentially even the way that we think about a safer world for all of us. And lo and behold, today, SentinelOne is deployed on, tens of millions of workloads worldwide, with a machine learning model that is working autonomously and is deciding what runs and what doesn't run. So it's also one of the biggest scaled true autonomous AI deployments in the world today, which is something really, really special. All of our customers are running a complete autonomous, no human touch required piece of software that basically governs their entire security posture.
Yeah, I have that agent on my machine that I'm talking to you with right now. Like, I can do that. I can go pick up on my there's a little icon, and I can look at it, and SentinelOne will come back and it'll appear on the screen and it will say secure or not, but thankfully it usually says secure. But I want to go back to something. You mentioned a couple of things, and there's going to be some members who are less technically inclined. So I want to give some definitions to them. So you mentioned EDR and XDR. So endpoint detection and response, extended detection and response, and you've grown from there. So this idea of you are defending at the very perimeter of a network. So the very perimeter of a network in this case might be your iPhone. It might be any kind of device that's at the end of the network, and then extending inwards is the way I've heard you talk about this. But something else that I've seen from the beginning, Tomer, with SentinelOne, is you've always been talking about AI, and it wasn't quite clear to me exactly what that AI is. I get that you're now talking about an autonomous agent, and something I want to key on that you said before was about the big data lake you have. So the way I think I'm hearing you describe this, and I would like you to maybe give me a little bit more on this, is that you have a system that is continuously evaluating, sort of making decisions autonomously as often as possible around flows of data that are in this data lake, and presumably in real time as well, maybe even on my machine right now. So I would like you to give me some sense of, you've been talking about AI a lot. You certainly use it. What makes the SentinelOne use of AI? Maybe if you could paint a picture of how this data framing feeds into this. What's so different about that we haven't seen before?
Yeah, yeah. Let me try and kind of split it in two, and we'll talk about the data lake in a second. But let's talk about what you have running on your endpoint.
Okay,
right
great,
now.
perfect.
Because that small thing, that small icon, what it's doing, it's actually in real time monitoring every single event, every single operation that every single program is doing while it's interacting with the CPU of the device. So, when you have your Office suite open, or you're browsing, or you're downloading a file, all of that is monitored in real time by our agent. And where AI comes to the picture is that we've been able to miniaturize machine learning models to then be able to decipher and process all of these trillions of events that happen in real time on the device. No need to go to the cloud, no need for internet connectivity. All of the brains for detection actually lives on your device. And that allows you not only for extreme low latency, because most other systems in our market, they're dependent on the cloud. How do you get an outage? If the cloud goes down and there's an error, then all of the endpoints are shut down. With an architecture like ours, it doesn't really matter. All the logic actually exists on the endpoint itself. And as we speak, the machine learning algorithms are parsing through all these events, and they're piecing together what we call a storyline, which is how each and every one of these processes are actually interfacing with your device. And it's comparing them into benign operations and malicious operations. And the moment the threshold is crossed, this is where the agent at machine speed in real time is basically interfering, stopping these malicious storylines and saying, hey, I think there's something bad going on here. Let me stop it in its tracks and potentially even completely autonomously remediate that. Now, these are split millisecond decisions. There's no human that can, look at it or review it. And sometimes in the world of today, if you're waiting for that human review, that's practically the time that takes you to get fully compromised. Those minutes, sometimes hours, they translate into this, security detection gap that we see with other pieces of software, especially with the olden, antivirus technologies.
Sure.
So when we talk about miniaturized AI, that's what's happening on your endpoint. That's very unique to us. We got patents across every single thing that I just described, all the way from the storyline capability, the machine learning capabilities, remediation and rollback capabilities. These are all highly unique to us. And to date, if you take any other endpoint software and you unplug it from your internet connectivity or your Wi-Fi, it will become significantly degraded. Most of the detection logic does not lie on the endpoint itself. With SentinelOne, there's practically no difference. There are, augmented capabilities in the cloud, but at the same time, the majority of defense capabilities actually lie on the endpoint, and that's highly differentiated. It's something that, the more regulated the environment is, the more important this becomes. And it also allows for a complete distributed fashion of compute, because then you don't need to immediately kind of amass a ton of data and then try to get to an outcome within a millisecond. Here, every endpoint kind of deals in its own vicinity. The more interesting part is that it's actually the most performant agent architecture in our field today. It's lighter than an antivirus. It's lighter than all of our competitors. It takes less resources than any other agent on the market, even though it's doing the most on the endpoint. So it's a pretty tremendous piece of technology, and that's what we run on the endpoint today. Now,
before you go to the data lake, I want to make sure I understand, and then I want you to hear that, and then we'll hand it to Jason for a follow-up on this. But I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So there's literally, on every machine, including mine, that is getting a consistently second-by-second benchmarking of flows of data and behavior that is normal and not normal, and making decisions on that. And then in addition to that, there is all of these agents acting independently and then connecting into something bigger, which is this giant network that it's feeding into this data. So there's like this layer. There's there's the local layer, and that local layer is making tremendous, up to the second independent decisions and feeding a data cloud in addition to that. Do I have that roughly right?
100%. That was pretty impressive, Tim.
Okay. Well, I don't think it's that impressive, but let's talk about the data lake, and then I know Jason wants to talk a little bit about go to market here, but let's talk about what that broader
Tim does think. Tim, you do think the technology is impressive. You're saying your retention of the information is not so impressive.
I'm just saying, I mean, the technology is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will accept the compliment, but it's I thought you explained it really well, is my point.
You did, yeah. Agreed.
So yeah, I think it's interesting. But let's talk about the data lake, and then let's talk about go to market, Jason.
Sure. So, we just talked about, this local approach, and then the data is being beamed to the cloud, which is really interesting, because when you think about the traditional, ways that cybersecurity has been done in the past decade or more, you probably have at some point bumped into this concept of security event management, which many people call the SIEM. The SIEM is this central repository that its job in life is basically to get data from all security products, endpoint products as well, and put it in one place so people can then, or security teams can then, traverse through that data and figure out when something maybe goes wrong across their entire estate. Now, if you look at any one of these average SIEM solutions, and I'm not going to talk about their deficiencies, just about the concept itself, about 70% roughly of the data that you find in the SIEM is the data that comes from the endpoint and from products like SentinelOne. So at some point, when EDR had become more and more popular, the amount of data that EDR provides is getting more and more comprehensive. And that is something that SIEM systems have started to find more and more complex to actually ingest and hold. Now, most SIEM solutions out there also worked in a very, flatline log way, which means that you're just getting events and then you somehow need to make sense of it, and you're starting to look at very large volumes of data. So when we started looking at the amount of data that we house, we kind of said, why would we send the 70% data into these archaic systems and actually make it slower for the customer? Why don't we instead ingest or find a way to ingest the rest of the 30% into our own data lake, marry it with the endpoint data so you can get complete and full context into everything that's happening. And that, for us, that transition happened about 5 years ago. We decided that this is so important, and it's going to be such a imperative building block to do real-time security for everything, not just for endpoint, that we actually acquired a company called Scalar. It was a next-generation data analytics company that has done just tremendous things in scaling petabyte scale, real-time, event-based data collection. And there were two companies like that in the world back then. We acquired one. Our competitor immediately acquired the other one. And then they kind of saw the same thing that we were seeing. And we kind of said, okay, we got to use this backend to now allow customers to onboard data in the easiest way possible. And it's a $40 billion market opportunity. So it actually bodes really well also, with our business prospects. So we made that acquisition. We transitioned into a fast flux data lake architecture. And then we started onboarding more and more data from all other, constituents in the security market, whether it's your firewall or email or identity, all these other components. And that has started to become a very significant business for us. So last quarter, as an example, we reported that 50% of our quarterly bookings were actually coming from that part of the business, right? From data plus AI capabilities that we now sell on top of the data lake, not specifically on the endpoint side. Endpoint and EDR, XDR, all that stuff. By the way, it's all the same. It's just different names, but EDR, XDR, EPP, endpoint protection, they're really now one of the same. So I know it's a bit confusing for folks out there, but it's really the same technology.
Thank you for saying that, by the way, because
Yeah,
it is an alphabet soup that is unnecessary. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it's look, if there's one thing that I think is maybe a little bit different with SentinelOne is that we try to not conform to the marketing jargons and like the overall pomp narratives that we see sometimes in cybersecurity. Vendors understand that cybersecurity is incredibly complex, and I think that sometimes they take advantage of that. I mean, we're truly trying to simplify it. We truly feel like cybersecurity is something that anybody should be able to use with ease out of the box. You don't need millions of dollars of services to make something work, but that's a different story. So the data lake really allows us to now get a foothold in the most strategic, I think, place for the entire posture of enterprise security. And it's not only a great story for us, it's also something that customers are looking to do right now because they understand that their legacy SIEM solutions are badly architectured or just old. I mean, these are 15, 20 years old architectured products that were designed to deal with gigabyte, maybe terabyte, scale. Now we're talking about petabytes and exabytes. You need tremendous speed to parse through all that data. And that's exactly what we're giving customers today with one of the fastest cybersecurity data lakes out there. And then comes the interesting part. So we got the data in. We got this tremendous data lake. It's faster. It's 50% plus cheaper than the actual SIEM that you have today. So you can imagine this is already very palatable for customers. Now, we have also figured that data lake or the data lake technologies are just an interim step. Because at the end of the day, if you're seeing today what's happening with generative AI, it's very clear that if you're able to actually action, a fast flux LLM at ingest point while you process the data to actually apply all these same reasoning capabilities that you see from some of the more modern LLMs on top of all enterprise data, then you get a very special system because you're getting to apply AI not only on one silo in cybersecurity, not only on the endpoint footprint or not only on the firewall, not only on the network, but on all of it. And this is something that a human or a human team alone cannot really do. It's just a lot of data, a lot of context that needs to be pieced together. And AI is just really classic in dealing with these types of data volumes. So when we talk to customers today, it's really about the potential outcome that they can get. It's not about just the cost saving and the speed. It's about thinking about their security stack as something that can be governed with AI across the board. And that gives you tremendous speed and comprehensiveness on how you think about security. And for us, that's the future of security. Whether you call it a SIEM or whatever it is, or a data lake or whatnot, it's that ability to ingest data in real time as fast as possible, as seamlessly as possible, and then apply AI in a context-driven way to then orchestrate real-time action back where you've identified an issue. And for that, we also acquired a hyper-automation company. So when you think about what we can deliver today, it's the entire closed loop from data origination to data ingestion, data processing, and then automation. That is the way where you see the events, parse the events, understand what's bad, and immediately tailor action, ideally with little human intervention. We do believe that in the world of AI, especially today, at the state of LLMs, there is no true autonomous action. Autonomous actions can be done for a relatively narrow, controlled scope. But when you talk about free-form operations, none of us want complete autonomous operations right now. Even when you ride a Waymo, here in San Francisco, there's still a team of humans that monitor that, right? And that's the same concept that we're applying for cybersecurity. We got a tremendous MDR team that is now becoming that supervision layer for all of what the autonomous system and algorithms are doing. And I think that results in just a complete new vision for cybersecurity, and one that we just see resonates a ton with customers today.
So Tomer, that's a lot about the technology that solves a lot of problems for your customers. And I think you did a great job of explaining it, but you actually, once you started talking through this and thinking about how do you go to your customers and present this, and you have to, of course, package things in a way that makes sense. It got me thinking about a slide that I remember seeing from your Q2 earnings, and I'm going to bring it up the screen because I think this ties to your go-to-market strategy. And a lot of the things that you were just talking about are right here. The classic picture, telling, 1,000 words is here as we see again, talking about multiple other parties where this can tie everything together. And of course, Purple and your Singularity platform, these are part of your go-to-market strategy. So I'm really curious to hear more about how you're taking your product to the market and learning more about what you're learning that's resonating with your customers that you're looking to try and use to accelerate your growth.
Yeah. Look, I think this is where a lot of what we do is not going to differ significantly from your other kind of platform vendors, right? I mean, that slide you showed gives you kind of a taste of the amount of capabilities that we have today, right? I mean, we got obviously a complete endpoint suite, but we also have complete cloud security suite capabilities, vulnerability management, MDR, identity security, and obviously SIEM and data analytics. So it's a fully fledged platform that really allows us to come in both for new customers to just consolidate away a lot of what they have in their environments. I would say that there's one big point of difference for us in the way that we interact with customers. I think for a lot of our peers, it's kind of an all or nothing approach. I mean, get my platform, you need everything, you're going to get a great deal, just make sure you get all the parts. And for us, we try and be very customer centric. So we want to be very flexible. I mean, you can choose our own components, and we have best of breed components, by the way, in almost every part of our platform, which is pretty amazing, right? I mean, we're the leading endpoint solution. If you look at MITRE, we're the highest grade for 5 years in a row. If you look at our data analytics, it's the fastest one around, according to third-party benchmarks. So you actually have a lot of best of breed components, but we don't force you to consume everything. What we take a lot of pride in is that we can actually make your current security investments better and compounded if you connect them into our platform. So if you want to migrate away from a component, we can offer that. If you want to keep that component and just attach it to our AI, to our orchestration, and enjoy all of that, brain power the SentinelOne brings in, we can do that too. We can actually make your other controls smarter and more automated. So it's not only about a total rip and replace and a months long project. It's something that allows us to come in and really be, a fit to what the customer wants to do at this present point in time. Now, look, more often than not, it translates into a full platform sale. I mean, the amount of times that we talked about the data lake and eventually sold everything we have on our platform, is obviously, quite often. But at the same time, I think that flexibility is key. And knowing that you're going to coexist with some vendors out there, you can't consolidate everything, nor do customers want to consolidate sometimes everything, especially not when there are certain areas where they just don't want to make compromises. So to us, flexibility is a big part of it. And we haven't even touched about this other mega opportunity that's coming up with cybersecurity right now, because everything we talked about right now was kind of the classic cybersecurity just done in a highly automated, highly AI-driven way. At the same time, the adoption of new generative AI technologies into enterprise environment actually represents a whole new opportunity and a need to secure AI itself, which is
Yeah.
where we yes.
Yeah.
So here's where $100 billion TAM becomes a $200 billion TAM, right? I mean, this is a mega opportunity, and we've made a tremendous acquisition, in that specific market, with
So Tomer,
acquiring.
I just
Yeah, go
to
ahead. Go ahead.
clarify on that. So classic cybersecurity, you're trying to keep the bad people that are outside out, and the naive humans inside from becoming the opening for the bad people on the outside. With LLMs, you're talking about the data of the LLMs and also what they can do as essentially employees that never clock out, right?
It's that, and it's also the our usage of LLMs, right? I mean,
That's
when
right.
we so let's talk about what's happening in every enterprise today and why everybody is panicking. Honestly, you take any Fortune 500 company, and there is already generative AI usage in there. Sanctioned,
Yep.
some of it is sanctioned, some of it is unsanctioned.
Yep.
People just use, generative AI services. They use ChatGPTs, they use Claude, they use Agentic Studios, they build apps with Copilot. It's a wild, wild west. And customers out there are looking for ways to regulate that usage, because
Yep.
that usage actually opens the door, A, to what you said, Jason, which is these agents, these technologies, I mean, they can go a bit rogue. They can do things that are unexpected. But even if it's not the agents and it's just the humans that are using the agents, you get this very, very distinct threat of data leakage,
Right.
because everything you put today, knowingly and unknowingly, into your generative AI usage
Yeah,
is out there.
right.
And people can potentially access that. And that's really scary if you're a Fortune 500 company that has no control right now as to what data is going into these models. Some of this is your proprietary data. So when we acquired Prompt Security, we kind of said this is the number one thing for security right now is how do you regulate that same endpoint that we have a lot of familiarity with, but now from a different angle. And that angle is generative AI data leakage prevention. And that, again, is looking to be just an amazing inflection point where we are allows you to regulate that generative AI usage in a way that many other technologies cannot really do. And obviously, it's a great complement to our already existing footprint on the endpoint.
I want to. I'm really glad you brought this up, and I want to push down this, and then we'll need to wrap it up after this and talk about your path to profitability. But this has a real cost implication to me as I think about it. One of the things I've seen recently, Tomer, which I feel like you were hinting at, is probably the most terrifying thing I've seen in terms of AI driven exploits is the innocent and maybe unintended prompt injection. And you've probably already seen this. There's a big meme going around about this very frustrated United Airlines customer that just kept prompting the agent and made the agent basically through a prompt. It wasn't even an attack. It was just, I'm going to prompt this thing until it gets on its knees and gets me to an agent, which is interesting. And so you have to be really on the front foot thinking about what are the ways this LLM behaves? How am I making it behave? How is the behavior that I'm teaching it creating security issues for my company? So here's my question about this, Tomer. This seems like an extraordinary amount, and you were talking about ingestion, and it does seem like there's this connection between value that shareholders might realize, shareholders of SentinelOne might realize is connected somewhat to the degree to which you can innovate, bring in new data, track more patterns. And so ingestion is a cost center that leads to value. So I wonder how you think about this. Like, how do you plan for scaling up your tooling, the way that your system works, the amount of data that you need? Because I imagine the data lake is a place where you could look and see all of the things that are happening in the data lake and say, I got 3 new products here based on the data that exists in the data lake. So that makes total sense to me. But man, like, how do you invest and scale in a way where you're just not constantly investing to get more and more ingestion, and that just ends up costing you an endless amount of money?
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of it comes back to architecture and how you think about these systems. And the interesting bit is that when we kind of reimagined our platform as being more data lake centric, it actually allowed us to put most of our resources on optimizing data ingestion and processing, and then that allowed us to basically treat every feature, product, and functionality as a mini application you enable on top of the broad-based database. So basically, you collect data once and you can unlock many, many use cases. And it has been fully proven. I mean, what we do is so hyper efficient that we are the cybersecurity vendor with the highest gross margin in the entire public market right now. If you think about modern SaaS companies, obviously, gross margins are largely dictated by your cost of cloud, your cost of processing data. And what we've been able to do, what the teams have been able to do, has been remarkable, all based on that technology that I talked about, which really allowed us to start dealing with petabyte, exabyte scale data in a highly, highly efficient, complete cloud native way. Which today, there aren't many companies in the world that are able to do that. I mean, you get, folks like Snowflake and, Databricks, and us at kind of the same breath. So the scale in which we work with today, the type of technology we have, is really, unparalleled almost in cybersecurity. And that allows you to have this really robust data lake. You don't want to constrain data ingestion. To your point, the more data we have, the stronger, our proposition becomes. So for us, it was all about building a hyper efficient data lake so we can start building more and more applications. So now, when you want, let's say, vulnerability management or exposure management, all you need to do is base that application on the data already collected, already existing on the data lake itself. So it allows you for these, economies of scale where you collect data once and you apply many applications. Same goes with generative AI DLP. We bought a new company, they have a new capability. You deploy that capability on the endpoint. The data goes into our data lake. Now we can marry it with all other pieces of data and create a tremendous application that is fully automated. And we don't need to rebuild a product. We can just focus on building the application. And that's kind of the way that we're thinking about continuous innovation as well. Because the one thing that I can attest to by doing this for now 12, 13 years is that we've never stopped innovating. And we've seen others kind of at some point stall on innovation. A lot of folks, I think, in the past decade in cybersecurity were moving with that motion of, I'm going to find product market fit. It's going to be great. I'm getting to some scale and I'm kind of done. Like I'm good. This is great. This is something I can sell more and more. We never had that notion. I mean, to us, just seeing the pace of technology change, even before generative AI, was just really clear to us. You gotta continue and innovate. You gotta keep on outthinking the adversaries, because we're not dealing with just ransomware gangs and e-crime groups. The type of customers that we protect today, we're really protecting them from other nation states. We're protecting the US government in many places from these same threat actors. We're seeing unsecure footprints, and we're trying to expand onto those because we know exactly what attackers are doing. You talked about generative AI as this prompt injection, potential new threat vector. What you described with United is a cute but a very easy to understand example. The other stuff we're seeing is not as cute. I mean, you're seeing the complete compromise of a complete database being done by one email that's being sent and parsed with a copilot, that then in the email you have a malicious payload instruction that then takes the LLM and guides it to basically exfiltrate all of the organization's data out. This is
Yeah,
not
it's
science
terrifying.
fiction.
It's
This
terrifying.
is true.
Yeah.
So, and that's going to also, become just more and more acute. These LLMs are sadly, not secure. We all have to come to terms with that right now.
Right.
So last question, Tomer. This is one that really kind of gets to the heart of, as investors in companies, something that we look for. So the past year and a half have been great for SentinelOne. We've seen, as you said, it continue to take market share, but converting those high margins and good operations into operating cash flow last year and free cash flow as you exited 2024, you're a cash flow positive business, which is really important. The inflection point of becoming a GAAP profitable business, that's something you can start seeing in the future now as well, and you're projecting for that. My question is taking those things, this massive market opportunity, and then creating per share value. What is your philosophy? How do you think about the opportunities out there, whether you're pursuing organic growth and expanding relationships with existing customers, that customer acquisition, you talked about an acquisition you made to acquire a technology that's really central to what you're trying to do. So looking externally, things like buying back shares to offset stock-based compensation, all of those various things that you can do. What is your philosophy for leveraging the resources of the business to try to create per share value as you're still trying to reach the company's goals?
Yeah, look, that's I think that's kind of the tricky balance we have to always navigate. And honestly, we have been doing all of the above, right? I mean, we've announced a buyback program because we want to continue and offset dilution. We're showing margin improvement at a rate that no other company in the public market has been showing. So obviously, we're optimizing what this company can do, and we're showing, a top tier growth rate all at the same time. So, we're at the point of our journey where things, might not look the most optimal. This is just, a point in the journey. But at the same time, you just don't want to compromise the long-term opportunity by any degree. We realize it's a bit painful right now to operate in the public market with the profile that we're showing in this point in time. But we also don't want to do anything too crazy to pull it back and maybe appear a bit more attractive right now, but really seed what we believe is what's going to take this company to be a $100 billion company, in the future. With all that said, I think our progression towards being a fully sustainable Rule of 40 company, which is by far our most immediate goal right now, we truly believe we can kind of sustain the growth rates we have today, and we can continue and expand on gross margin. On operating margin. Those two, in combination with our continued focus on extracting more and more market opportunities in a cost-effective way, and I'll explain what a cost-effective way is. When we make an acquisition, which you would argue typically is very dilutive, we are aiming for companies with certain profiles and for a certain integration strategy that can allow us to onboard, an asset that opens up the opportunity, but doesn't really adversely impact, let's say, our operating margin in a way that causes us to veer off of our Rule of 40 trajectory. We've made 2 acquisitions in the last 30 days, and the entire impact to operating margin was less than 1%. So to us, I mean, if we're able to open up a 10x opportunity while having less than a 1% impact to operating margin, that to us is just a great recipe to continue and make sure, for shareholders that we're going after that long-term opportunity. And I think sooner rather than later, the profile of the company is going to get, again, best of breed, much like our growth. We are going to be a Rule of 40 company. This is why we're here. We want to be profitable. This is what we intend to do. We're a sustainable company. We want to be a long-term company. We want to be a market leader in cybersecurity. We got all the potential to get there. Nobody starts as a $100 billion market cap company. You build your way there. And we're relatively young. And, we got, I think, some of the most tremendous talent out there. And that's the trajectory. That's what we're trying to execute towards.
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting story. It's going to be interesting to follow. I would love to see the SentinelOne research on what LLM attacks are looking like, because you've mentioned this, and I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. You're going to be at the front lines of seeing both the promise of AI and the threat of AI. And if nothing else, that is going to be a heck of a position to be in. So thank you,
Yeah.
Tomer, for joining us and talking us through this and the story of SentinelOne. It's a real fascinating one, and we'd love to have you back and check on this again, because the story of AI is going to evolve and you're going to evolve with it. So let's check back in. We're going to need more.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And we really appreciate the time today. This has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tomer.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. All right, fools. We'll see you again soon. Stay tuned for more on Fool 24. Fool on, everyone.